So first, I would just want to say thanks for joining us today, everyone. We have a very important session for you. We're going to be talking about winning the cybersecurity war, or winning at cybersecurity, and why your antivirus software is basically worthless, and how to secure your computers going into 2023. And we have a special guest here with us today, which is Jason McNew of ConnectWise, and he is going to be joining Henry and going over all of the information for you today. And they do have a lot to talk about, so I will go ahead and pass it over to Henry and let them get started.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you all for joining us. We are really excited to have you here as we kind of kick off 2023. Our goal is to keep you educated so that you can keep your business secure, so that you can keep your organization thriving. So we do have a lot to talk about. I'm really excited to have Jason joining us today. And I'll explain a little bit about that and why. Today, like Stephanie kind of led off with, what we're going to cover is a bunch, but essentially kind of a pretty simple subject. We're going to start with helping you understand a little bit about why antivirus software, the old school traditional antivirus, and a lot of the things that you can get for free on the market are really a waste of money, if not worse. Why any size business is the perfect target, perfect size target, perfect revenue opportunity for any hackers, why they're aiming for everybody. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how attacks are working today. So we'll get a little bit into the weeds, not a whole lot. If you're not super technical, don't panic, but we'll talk a little bit about why the hackers' attacks are so effective at evading firewalls, antivirus, IT professionals who are really working hard at doing their job well, but the attackers are able to get past all of that. Why managed services at its core, your VPNs, your new firewalls, all those things that you've got in place don't stop the attackers nowadays, at least not by themselves. So ultimately, what we're going to wrap up with and dig into is one or two of the tools and the systems and practices that we're seeing have the most amazing effect and most strongest chance at stopping attackers in their tracks, at really making things hard for the attackers. And that's ultimately the goal. So we're going to really get down to the hope and the solution and the opportunity for you to really dial up your security before we get out of here. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but if you've not had a chance to talk with us a whole lot, TurnKey Solutions has been doing IT support and security and infrastructure and compliance since about 1999. We take care of clients across the U.S., but mainly from our offices in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and the North Shore, and in Dallas, Texas. So we've got a tremendous amount of experience in this, but I've got a great opportunity for you to learn from Jason McNew. We'll talk about that in a second, because he's got more experience from some really cool perspectives. What do we do? What does TurnKey Solutions really work on? There's a lot of things that we try to explain. We tell folks we do cloud and HIPAA and CMMC and cybersecurity and disaster recovery and whatnot, but ultimately kind of boils down to, yes, we do the computer stuff for our clients. There's a lot of things that we do day in, day out, and there's a lot of things that are really important. This is one of the most important things that we can do, is educate, help you understand how things have changed and where the industry has changed and where the protections that you need to put into place have changed over the last little bit. A little bit about me, nothing huge. I've been doing this as an IT professional for a long time. Back when I had hair and wasn't quite so fat, but I've been working with organizations, had the opportunity to work with hundreds of organizations during our time with TurnKey Solutions, building networks and putting in IT departments, building infrastructure systems, advising on their overall IT practices. Just had the opportunity to spend 2022 finishing up my first book, Winning the Cyber War. We'll talk about that at some point in the future, and that was fun, because what we're again trying to do there is help educate. So for clients and prospects and people out in the community that are readers, I've tried to boil down a lot of very good tactical go do this kind of information there. Jason, I'm really excited. I'm going to quit talking in just a second and hand the mic over to you. But Jason McNew is our featured guest today, and we're so excited to have him with us. He's a United States Air Force veteran. So Jason, first off, thank you very much for your service protecting our country. Thanks, and our freedoms.
Got my Air Force hat on. My son got it.
There we go. Awesome. Very good. Look, this is, this industry has evolved a lot. When I was in college, there were degrees in like old school programming and whatnot. But one of the cool things that Jason brings to the table is he's actually got a degree in IT and cybersecurity from Penn State. And 25 years experience in the field of IT, 12 of which were spent with the White House Communications Agency and Camp David. He's got a CISSP certification, which that is really, really hard in this industry. It is a security credentials and a certification that, quite frankly, if you've ever tried to study for it, you know that you bought a whole lot of very thick books and studied really, really hard for it, and it just has an amazing wealth of knowledge.
Probably about as hard as the CPA, I think. The CISSP. It's not as hard as the bar, but it's about as hard as the CPA.
Yeah. That's what a lot of people have told me. Founded a Stronghold Cybersecurity, your own company, and currently working as a principal solutions advisor for ConnectWise. Now, there's a ton more you've told us about yourself, but Jason, is that kind of the high level?
Yeah, I think kind of the key takeaway, the perspective that I bring to the small to mid-sized business space in the private sector. I spent a lot of time working in buildings with no windows, surrounded by barbed wire and machine guns and that kind of stuff. Kind of these, extreme secure facilities, multiple classification facilities, special access programs, going to places that don't exist, that kind of stuff. And when we work in that type of environment, the juxtaposition between that sort of security and the security that we find in the small to mid-sized business is striking. You know what I mean? It's bringing that type of experience to the SMB, I think, provides some valuable insight that they might not necessarily have direct access to, and also provides for a lot of interesting stories. When I present live, people always ask me questions about being at Camp David and the White House and that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, we're going to bake in some time at the end to get some questions. By the way, as we go, if you have questions down in the chat section in the Zoom program, if you wouldn't mind, feel free to put a question in there, or even if you can see the video and audio, or if you just want to say hi, feel free to put a chat in there. But as we go, put in your questions. We're going to try to hold them till the end. But as we go and we talk about something, feel free to put a question in there. If it works out that we can answer it while we're rolling, we will. Otherwise, we'll make sure and have time at the end for Jason to answer all your questions. So we really appreciate you being here. And it's not that often that my audience gets to hear from people with your kind of experience and knowledge. So it's very exciting. If y'all hold out to the end, towards the end of the presentation, what we're going to walk through is how to get a full review of your cybersecurity stack. We're offering, in connection with some of the resources that Jason brings to the table, a full deep dive review of every bit of protection that you have in your environment, and where it fits and where it doesn't fit, and where there might be more effective solutions for you there. There's a very powerful resource guide for cybersecurity essentials that we've been curating over the years when people ask us a question about, hey, what's this mean, or what's that mean, or what do I do for this, that, or the other. We've tried to boil it down to a good, simple guide there. A demo of some of the products that Jason has the opportunity to talk to about today, and a copy of my book. So there's a ton of resources available. We won't spend a whole lot of time now, but we'll get to those again in a bit. Look, before we go too deep into this and start talking about protections, it's important to set the stage. And Jason, we see things from our clients' perspectives, and we stay in training and we stay in the news, and we see the attacks that are happening in my hometown, across the world, on companies that we use, companies that we're very aware of. But let's boil it down here. Why do the office managers, the business owners, the IT directors of the world need to pay attention, even if they're a small business? And what's going on in the world of cybersecurity from your perspective?
Well, look at the. I'm going to go right to the bottom bullet here. What does it say? Everything is a target, right? And this is just the plain truth. And one of the things that we like to say in my line of work is that networks are divided into two categories: those that have been breached and those that are going to get breached. And unfortunately, these days, I think we can make the same exact argument about your personal identity, Henry. It's either been ripped off or it's going to get ripped off, right? And the reasons for this is the attackers, generally speaking, are very entrepreneurial and frankly capitalistic. And for the most part, most of the time, they're simply trying to make money, right? So the question is do you have money and can they get it, right? So they're very unscrupulous, and they don't really care if you're a nonprofit or if you're a church or if you're a public school, if you're publicly traded. They don't care. You know what I mean? They really don't care. It's, do you have money and can they get it? And the way that they operate, I would say, I remember going to baseball games with my dad at Veterans Stadium in the 1980s outside of Philly, right? And we'd come out in the parking lot, and there would be one section, and there would be 200 cars that had all their windows broken, all of them, right? So what these attackers would do is they would go in and smash every single window, and then find, cars that had stuff and cars that didn't. Most of them didn't have anything, but maybe 10 or 15% did. You know what I mean? And that's exactly how these attackers operate. They do reconnaissance, they break in, and if they can, try to get money from you somehow, they can. If they don't, they don't. You know what I mean? And there's, for the most part, they're just trying to make money. And until fairly recently, when I presented live, I would say, who thinks they're not a target? And we would see some hands, but nowadays I think people are starting to understand. They used to say, well, my data is not worth anything to anybody, and that might be true, but your data is worth something to you. And that fact can be used against you in order to expropriate funds from you. And that's just, whether we like it or not, that's what we're up against. You know what I mean? Yeah. And nowadays they've really come to prefer to small to mid-sized businesses because they tend to be soft targets. You know what I mean? They get in, they steal, they get out, and they're not well defended, and it's easy work. The old saying, you don't have to be the fastest runner, just don't be the slowest one, right?
Just don't be the slowest, right? Be faster than the guy behind you.
Yeah, right. Let the bear eat somebody else.
Right. Yeah. Well, in that respect, there's a lot of good data about who the bear is eating. We always look at the biggest, most reputable studies to try to help explain the conversation. One of the ones that's fairly hard to argue with the validity of the numbers is the FBI's Internet Crime Report. 2021 data is out. They're working on the 2022 report. But what we saw there is, and we've been pulling this report and sharing it with people for years now. And every year it goes up. The gray lines are the number of complaints they receive, and the red line is the dollar value associated with the losses. Now, these are just American companies or organizations, but what we saw is not a big jump in the number of complaints from 2020 to 2021, but a massive jump in the dollar value lost. So the bear is getting a lot to eat. The hackers are getting a lot of money. And it just kind of always reminds me that we got to follow the money. This is growing because it's paying off. It's paying really well for the attackers. I don't know if there's
and this can't be overstated. And this isn't, having run a small business for myself, this is an existential threat to businesses. You know what I mean? The ones that are not defended, have no defense for this, and have no plan in place, and have no insurance, have no business insurance, cyber insurance. The failure rates for these are really high. You know what I mean? And I would equate assuming that level of risk to not having an LLC and then driving around without car insurance or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Can you imagine if you got into an accident, you're going to get sued into the ground and you have nothing left. You know what I mean? And those are examples of administrative controls. Insurance is an administrative control, and LLC is an administrative control.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily technical controls, but if you're running or you own a small to mid-sized business and you're not properly protected, the level of risk that's associated with this is very, very high. Henry, getting with Henry, he could help you to assess exactly what these risks are and what the potential impact are if you're not protected.
Yeah, that's what we do. So kind of thinking through that, as we kind of look at the cost of threats or attack are growing, the numbers are going through the roof. You and I have talked about this preparing for this conversation, but this is one of the things that I have to explain to companies all the time, that look, old school antivirus is it's so worthless, we might as well just call it dead. Why is that, Jason? What are y'all seeing from ConnectWise's perspective?
I wouldn't call it old school antivirus. Is basically like having a wooden shield. It's better than nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's just outdated technology. And old school antivirus is basically just plain old pattern matching, like a fingerprint, right? In a database, the fingerprint has to be pretty much exact in order for it to be a hit, right? So the way that old school AV works is it matches the pattern of malicious logic and then it quarantines it. That's all it does. You know what I mean? The newer versions, your EDR and your MDR and these kinds of things, they have functions that look like artificial intelligence heuristics. They have pattern matching and pattern recognition. They could recognize malicious behavior. So it's like, looking out your window. If you see somebody looking in your neighbor's window, you know that that's suspicious behavior, even if they haven't broken the window yet, right? So not only does it have far more advanced capabilities in recognizing pieces of malicious logic, it could also intervene, stop, and then undo damage in real time. And just to give the best example of this, you remember WannaCry that went around a couple years ago, right? So North Korea, they got a hold of a piece of a weaponized piece of malicious logic that was leaked from the NSA. They wrapped it in a worm, attached a crypto locker function to it, and then they set the thing loose on Europe, right? Start spreading around Europe. Machines that were protected with Sentinel-1. So this is what you'll call a zero-day exploit because it's never been seen in the wild before. It's brand new. Now, traditional antivirus would not pick something like that up because it's pattern matching. Then it doesn't have the pattern matching. But when they put WannaCry on Sentinel-1, Sentinel-1 crushed it immediately, even though it had never seen it before, because it said, okay, this is doing something it shouldn't be doing. That's kind of the difference. So modern EDR and MDR, I'm not a developer or hacker, but somebody could write a brand new piece of malicious logic today and then try to attack a system with it. And these advanced EDR and MDR will pick up on it and crush it right away. But not all the time. It's not guaranteed. Not everything is guaranteed. It might be 99% effective, but or 99.99, but there's always that chance. That's why you have to have defense in depth.
Right. What about the what they call shadow IT and how hackers are able to just use the stuff that's already installed, that your in-house employees installed or your previous IT director installed? How is that affecting the need for that almost artificial intelligence or that analytics instead of behavior or pattern matching?
Yeah, I'm going to back up off the tech a little bit and talk about the administrative side of that too. That's one more reason why people that are listening should reach out to Henry and TurnKey Solutions and then have an assessment of their IT environment done in order to determine what are the risks, right? And this would be like, let's say you were buying a house, right? And let's say it was an old house. My house was built in 1760, right? Would you buy a house that was 100 or 150 years old without having a building inspection? No. You know what I mean? So in my opinion, if you're operating a network today and you haven't had an assessment by a professional like Henry that knows what they're doing, come in and look at it and tell you what the risks are, that would be like buying a 150-year-old house without getting an inspection done. You just don't know what you're getting into, right? So when TurnKey comes in and looks at your situation, one of the things they're going to talk about is shadow IT. And the reason that shadow IT typically flows out of an organizational failure, right? Usually it's because somebody in management or leadership is not providing the employees with the tools that they need to be successful at their job, right? So that's a whole different discussion. But shadow IT is a big risk because employees will start installing things, they're downloading software, they might be using cloud, and all of these things are introducing uncontrolled risk into your environment, which shouldn't be happening in the first place. But when you have those risks in there and there's unknown risks, which there always are, that's what we're going to have defense in depth. Things like your SentinelOne, Perch, SOC, backups, cybersecurity insurance, so on and so forth. So you want to have the mix of there's no silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
So you want to have the right mix of administrative and technical controls in place in order to, number one, reduce the probability of a successful attack. And then secondly, when there is a successful attack, which there could be anyway, even if you do all the right things, it's going to help reduce the impact of that.
Yeah. Some of the most common things that we see that are shadow IT, I don't know about y'all, Chris, but it is, we see a ton of old remote desktop and remote control programs. Like there's every free version of, like the go to my PC competitors, log me in, all those products, everything that somebody could find. We'll when we typically do that first few audits with customers, we'll see at least 5 different ways that somebody had installed a tool that didn't have multi-factor, didn't have strong passwords, nobody in the ownership of the company knew about even, but it allows people to remote in and have full, unfettered, unmonitored, unlogged access to their computers from anywhere in the internet. And it's terrifying. And when we show this to folks, they're usually, sometimes people want to cut the meeting short right now and let's go uninstall those programs because you just don't know about it unless you're looking for these things. So that's it's a crazy reality. One of the things that we saw kind of other ways is in the Colonial Pipeline and the Cisco attacks. Colonial Pipeline, a piece of that shadow IT or the old stuff that apparently the world kind of learned happened with them was an old password for a VPN that didn't have MFA on it. With Cisco, it was an employee who stored their work passwords in Google Chrome, synchronized that out to the browser. It went to the Google Cloud, and hackers are able to get to that. And then work their way into the network.
Never ever store passwords in a browser.
Yes, please.
Just don't do it. I'm surprised browsers even come offer that capability.
Yeah. Really, if we could just cut the meeting short right here and just let everybody go home, that would be the point to take away. That would be not the point, but that would be a phenomenal point if that's the only thing you took away.
Hygiene is still a very big problem for sure.
It's huge. It's huge.
And even when you do it correctly, I mean, look at what happened with LastPass, right? And they make a good product. It's a good company. But it just goes to show why defense in depth matters and why you need to have an incident response plan, because even if you do all the right things, you could still have an adverse event. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Look at Kaseya or SolarWinds. I mean, these are hard targets, and these state-backed actors they got into them anyway.
Right.
They went in bad enough, they're going to get in eventually, believe me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not if, but when, sadly. We'll talk about this in more detail, but I want to show you all kind of a good industry visualization of what we're learning the hackers are doing. Don't feel like you got to write notes and completely understand this slide just yet. We'll get back to it in a second and kind of break it down. But it's important to know that you've got to have a plan in defending your environment. Jason, you use the term defense in depth, and it's such a powerful three words because what we've got to kind of bake into that defense in depth is a really good plan. And the reason why is because the hackers have a phenomenally good plan. Digging into that a little bit, the statistics that we're learning from all the big studies from IBM, FBI, and so many other organizations that spend a lot of time and money digging into this is that hackers are in environments 287 days on average in 2021 before they were contained. 287 days. That's 9 months. They were in the environment 7 months, on average 212 days before they were even detected. So they were there for 7 months. And what were they doing? What were,
this is just plain old warfare. It's reconnaissance, and then figuring out what you're going to do when you're ready to execute on your attack. And sometimes they don't attack. Sometimes they just leave. They'll leave the back door. They might decide you don't have anything that they want, or you're not a good target, and they leave the back doors there and then use your network to attack other networks. You know, I often compare these APTs, and this is what we call a toehold in the network. It's kind of like mold inside the wall in your house, you know. Unless you go ripping the drywall out looking for it, you're not going to know it's there. You know what I mean? Sometimes you find out when they start doing something, sometimes you don't. And then here we have a slide from CSI, right? Henry, go back to the previous slide for a second, then come forward and see where we're going with this. Back one more. Right, so we're talking about tools, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, right? On the attack framework. So the analogy that I like to make here is we've all seen you know, crime movies, serial killers, you know, stuff on A&E or whatever. And you go in and the police, and they can basically identify who the killer is or who they think it is by looking at the crime scene, because they do a certain type of reconnaissance. They break in a certain way. Once they get in, they perform certain acts. They do certain things to try and cover up. They might take certain things, right? So these TTPs that we track from these various actors, they're kind of like serial killers in a way, right? And after we track enough of them, and then we look at what they're doing and where they came from and where they went, then we start to get an idea of who done it. You know, did it come from Russia? Did it come from China? Did it come from North Korea? Was it this? Was it that? So on and so forth.
And so that's where we kind of get this idea that realistically, there have been a tremendous amount of experts in government agencies and IT professionals like Jason who have done that kind of that Gil Grissom, that CSI work to really figure this out.
Forensics is an entire subdiscipline within cybersecurity, and there are people with deep expertise in it. And it's something that I could speak to, but I'm not a forensics expert. I don't do it 40 hours a week, but I know people that do.
So look, let's kind of think through that next little bit of it, Jason. One of the things that we try to explain to people is that when the ransom note pops up, again, we talked about it,
that's the blood on the carpet. You get home, the front door is open and it's broken, and you peek in there and you see blood on. That's the blood on the carpet. It's too late.
Right. You know, that's what down here in that whole framework of where the attackers are going. That's this one right here, the what they call the impact at the bottom right there. That's the last step in the attacker's plan to let you notice it. So let's dig backwards a little bit. Let's look at it. Let's bring out the CSI hat and kind of think through this. In those 212 days before we even know that the attacker is in the environment, what are they doing? You know, they're the simplest example I use. I don't know about you, Jason, but I tell people, look, they're in your house, they're rummaging around. They're trying to find where your jewels are.
You know, one thing that drives me crazy. Look at this picture here. It's always the hoodie, right? This is not what the guy robbing your house looks like. This is not what the people that are breaking in your computers look like, right? These caricatures drive me crazy.
Sorry, it was clip art.
No, I'm not picking on you. I'm not picking on you, because everybody does it, including me. But the point I'm driving at here is do not underestimate these outfits, right? Because now think of they're basically businesses, so to speak, and they're businesses insofar that they exist to generate cash flow. And a lot of them look, smell, act, taste, and function like a real business. They have financial targets. They have spreadsheets, they have project managers, they have engineers, they have all this stuff, right? So this really is organized crime. It's just that what they're doing is unlawful, at least here. and it might not even be unlawful for wherever they are. And you know, Russia's getting picked on a lot these days, but just to use that as an example, in Russia, it's illegal to hack within inside of Russia, but it's not illegal to hack outside of Russia. So if you're a Russian citizen and you're hacking American businesses, the Russian government isn't going to do anything about it. I mean, not unless you get the FBI or Interpol or something like that. Now, that's not true in most of the Western world, the United States, Europe, I believe probably South Korea, right? They have legal prohibitions on this stuff. So you set up some type of it's literally a business, a shop, and you're going to hire engineers, real project managers, real money people, all these things. And then you're going to start, you know, setting up some type of a ransomware shop. And it really looks and smells like a real business with real talent in it. It's just that what they're doing is, you know, unethical. But don't underestimate any of that. It's not just some 400-pound fat guy sitting in his parents' basement, or you know, any of these caricatures. All completely untrue.
So the smash and grab that you described earlier, combined with the big organizational resources that the known large attacker groups are what we're starting to learn that they really look like. Again, not the guy in the hoodie, but that together, what we're seeing here is that early on, what I'm seeing in our install base and customers, and what I'm learning. Tell me where there's more details. But what we're seeing is they're doing the smash and grabs way early on in the like here at the top, this way up at the top, their priority definitions, planning, directing, target selecting. So they're doing the smash and grab. They're sending out the fake email with the FedEx attachment or whatever. And if you download that and you install the little program that allows the hacker in your environment, that's where they start doing the information gathering. And the big organizations that they have with like you said, internal tech support, and a lot of there's pictures of organizations where they have like a cafeteria, they have bosses, cubicles, phone systems. They look like an American business, where we're seeing that that's where in the informational gathering period or stage, they're spreading around, looking at your network, trying to see, okay, is this somebody that has any kind of value? Can I hop from this computer to a server? What do they do? Let me see if I can figure out what their ballpark annual revenue is, and starting to think through what your business.
A lot more sophisticated. It used to be that their demands were kind of not really tied to reality. But nowadays they're pretty good at figuring out what they think your top line revenue is, and then they tie the ransomware demand to that. Like, let's say, for example, that your top line revenue is $10 million. They might send the ransom at 10% of top line. You know what I mean?
Right.
They've gotten away from making unreasonable demands of small businesses, and they've also gotten away. Heck, remember what was the movie with Michael Myers where you said, you know, we're $1 million. They all started laughing. $1 million. You know, we do that every day in revenue anyway.
Right.
Or the spy movie, right?
Yeah.
But they've also gotten away from making unreasonably small demands of large companies. You know, right. They've just become operationally, administratively more mature. They were always technically competent. It's just they've become more operationally and administratively competent as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a scary thing, is that they're becoming organizationally mature, and that's what we're really seeing. So, you know, as we kind of dig through that and think, you know, what does a product like an endpoint detection and response, and we've blown past that term several times today. It's that's what we're talking about nowadays when we talk about an EDR. Your cybersecurity insurance applications are asking nowadays, what EDR are you using? Not antivirus. They're saying, what EDR? Because they want to know that you have this specific class of product in.
And I want to jump in here, and I want to be super clear about something. Insurance. We've all been dealing with insurance in some form our entire adult lives, right? You buy insurance from Flo or a Lizard, or you buy it for your house or whatever. And the thing is those forms of insurance are very mature. Homeowners insurance, driver's insurance, life insurance, they're very mature, right? They have all this actuarial data. There's all this experience. Yeah. So And you go for car insurance, you're like, yeah, I have ABS, yeah, I have,
Right.
this and that, and you're kind of good, you know what I mean? Same thing with your house, you know what I mean? Do you have an alarm? Is your roof new? You know what I mean? When was the house built? Cyber insurance is not like that.
Yeah.
Do not, under any circumstances, pencil whip these checklists, right? And
Yeah.
when you get these things, if you're not completely sure what they're asking, call TurnKey or call Henry and then ask them to explain it to you. Because if you take out an insurance policy and you don't fill that checklist out with perfect accuracy, if you have a claim, they're going to deny it.
Yeah.
That's what's been going on. That is super important. The burden, the caveat emptor, the buyer beware on cyber insurance is much higher on you than it is for car insurance or homeowners insurance or life insurance, because those things are very mature. Lloyd's of London has been around, what, 500 years or more, right?
Right.
But cyber insurance it's a new discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we're actually seeing that. We've unfortunately had an opportunity to watch a company not be able to receive any funds or help from the insurance company, because the first thing the insurance company did was send a very expensive auditor to go in and make sure that everything that company had said on the application was implemented and implemented perfectly. And they found like 2 computers that didn't have the protections on perfectly. They weren't our client at the time, thank God. I don't know from what perspective that is. Sorry for them, but it was an education, let's just say. But the auditor found that there were a few things that weren't perfect in that environment, and that caused them to invalidate the claim. So
Yeah,
this product of EDR it's a building block. Would you say, Jason? It's not the only thing, but it allows more protections to be capable. It is the thing that the beginning of that technology that looks for pattern recognition and odd behavior, and builds towards the ability for humans to be able to watch and look at the logs.
EDR is a fundamental building block of defense in depth, and we're going to get a little bit more into defense in depth in a minute. But defense in depth basically is designing a security solution with the assumption that one or more layers may fail to do their job at some given time, and then the other layers are going to have to do that job for you. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So next up, the next step of this defense in depth strategy that we're looking at, and it's not everything. You still need a firewall. You still need good policies and procedures. But these 2 blocks that we're going to talk about today is the Security Operations Center. And you mentioned you've spent some time in these places, but this is for us, where we see this is it's the ability for a person and massive amount of big computing capability to look at those millions and millions of logs that your computer's spitting out right now and figure out which ones represent a threat. That tiny little percentage of them represent a potential threat or a real threat, and do that in real time. Because what we're finding is if you're doing a log review every 30 days, which nobody does, but if you're doing a log review every 80 days or whatever, once a year, twice a year, it's way too late by then. If you see a log that if I'm reading your logs, which it's just not really feasible anymore, because again, computers spit out millions of logs a day. But if I were to look at that, and I was looking at it 6 months after the fact, it's just too late. The hackers have come and gone and done their thing.
Yeah, I think we have a slide ahead of us that we're going to kind of get into an analogy here that I think people are more familiar with. This is all the airports in the U.S., right, Henry?
Right, right.
Yeah. You've also, I think everybody's seen this map at some point somewhere. Okay, go on to the next slide, right?
Yeah.
Next one. This is what the FAA is watching for you, right? You have a bunch of human operators all over the country watching all this stuff. Think about all the airplanes that are in the sky at any given time, right? Now, out of all the thousands, tens of thousands of landings, takeoffs, flight paths, attitude, elevation, all these things that are going on, how many things out of all this are something for actual concern on a day-to-day basis for the FAA? An airplane going somewhere where it's not supposed to be, or something like that. It's really quite small. But when you do have something going on, you want a human being intervening in that. And this is exactly what a security operations center and then SIEM is doing for you, right? It's taking all of this noise. It's just, there's tons and tons and tons of noise. And then, you need to know what you need to know. When do we actually need to notify a human that they need to take some type of an action? And that's exactly what SIEM and then our SOC does for you. Now, the SOC that comes with Perch and with SentinelOne is a co-managed SOC, and Henry gets that along with ConnectWise. So we have 160 people in our 24/7, 365 SOC that the TurnKey Solutions has access to, that are watching these things. And it's exactly like the FAA or the people sitting in NORAD watching for missiles coming in. I mean, most of what they see is benign, but when they see something that needs action, it needs action, and that's all there is to it.
And it needs action now. It
needs action now, and it needs it from a skilled human.
Right.
Machines cannot do everything. They can't.
Right. Yep. And that's kind of, that is such an important thing for us to kind of walk through with folks. Is look, I know I sold you an antivirus product 5-6 years ago, or a firewall, 3, 4, 5 years ago. But that's not everything, and it can't look through that. So, why implement an EDR? Kind of backing up to that one specific step. If we're looking at this attack framework, and I like to use the term boom, of like, that's when the attack really started causing devastation. It's where that somewhere in there, after they're testing their capabilities and they're staging their capabilities, and they make that initial access somewhere in there. That's when the attacker, that's when we're kind of now right of that boom. That's when their first ships landed on your shores to some degree. But with a good EDR, we have the ability to push the stop way farther up in their attack. We have the ability to stop them before they start spreading to other computers, before they start using the programs in your network already, the theoretically quote unquote good programs, before they start using those and using them in weird ways or previously unacceptable ways, before they start using the weaknesses in your infrastructure to exploit you. A good EDR we see has the ability to stop them there, or even sometimes before they get even that first thing in there. Has some of the products and implemented at specific ways at specific points, depending on their attack, have the ability to stop them even before they get into staging their attack.
Just to drive the point home, the difference between traditional antivirus and EDR is like the difference between anti-lock brakes and then a car with active collision avoidance, right?
Yeah.
Say you're driving a brand new Toyota and a little kid runs out in front of you, you're not paying attention, the car's going to stop itself. You know what I mean? There's nothing's going to happen. You know what I mean? It really is that good.
Yeah. Now, with a SOC, we talk about this all the time as well, is that the beautiful part of implementing a SOC is it allows us to get humans in bigger data, bigger computing power, looking at those things and probably stopping attacks even sooner. And it's the time element that is so powerful, because if I can stop a hacker within hours or days, instead of 212 days or 7 months, then you have a real strong ability to say, look, we absolutely lost nothing in this attack. We have a chance of actually seeing the attackers completely be foiled. And we can see, the weird behaviors of maybe somewhere in the system, somebody logged on that really shouldn't have ever logged in there, or they didn't log in like that ever for the last 3 years. And so those odd behaviors are detected with the log review that's happening almost close to real time. One of the big advantages for us working with somebody like you, Jason, and ConnectWise and the Perch SOC tools and team is that we're able to, when we find an event or when Perch finds an event or y'all's teams, and they let us know, we don't just get an alert, we get engaged experts who are calling us, like people with a tremendous amount of knowledge, and they're saying, look, we're seeing this event happening in your environment. it's similar to an event that we're seeing on hundreds of other servers in the realm or in our environment, or it's similar to an attack that we saw happen elsewhere. We need to go look in this direction, or we need to go check for this based on our experience on a global scale. And that is just massive. And we just can't bring that to customers without engaging a SOC. And so I just can't stress that and how impactful that is.
Henry, that I think that what ConnectWise is doing for cybersecurity and with our partners is, it's not an exaggeration to say it's similar to what Milton Hershey did for chocolate, or what Henry Ford did for the automobile, right?
Yeah.
And those were things that were only available to rich, connected people prior to that. So what ConnectWise is doing along with our partners is making these enterprise level cybersecurity technologies, SOC, SIEM, EDR, MDR, available to the small to mid-sized business. You know, I mean, these things, yeah, we had this stuff at Boeing and the White House Communications Agency 10, 15 years ago, but there was no SIEM 10 years ago in the small to mid-sized space, small to mid-sized business. There was no EDR. And that's what, you know, ConnectWise is doing through a mix of, you know, automation, economies of scale, you know, labor, those kinds of things, is making these advanced capabilities available to small, mid-sized businesses, like TurnKey, and then in turn available to your clients. And you know, TurnKey, and we work with a lot of partners, and TurnKey and our other partners, they're exactly like a trusted local mechanic, right? You take your car to your trusted local mechanic, and he's gonna say, well, your brakes are fine until next inspection. If we patch up the exhaust, it'll be fine for the summer and you're good, right? But if you take the car to the dealer, I'm picking on the dealers, what do you get? A bid for $2,000, right? So MSPs like TurnKey, they know their clients, they know what they need, they know what their operations are, they understand what their tolerance for risk is, and that kind of thing. And they lean directly on us for, you know, for the heavy lifting, economies of scale, and you know, in the military, what we call force multiplication.
Yeah. Now, you know, you and I are joking about this beforehand, and using the castle and moat and all that analogy. And one of the things that was funny was we were thinking, how hard would it have been to have to build this? And that force multiplication, the economies of scale that y'all bring to the table, allow every small business to have these significantly enhanced protections that might have only been available to the kings in the past.
For your small financial practice or something like that,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
And this is what we call defense in depth. This is a medieval castle, right? And this is built with the idea that any one of the security layers could fail at any given time. And the crown jewels are in the highest tower, the highest room in the highest tower, and all that.
Yep. Yeah, if we put our crown jewels there, like our most important stuff there. So, you know, our that database, the set of tools or the spreadsheets that are your most important intellectual assets, your emails, put them behind the strongest set of defenses, behind more than one thing. Understand how they work, and be able to visualize is what we recommend our clients. Be able to really kind of visualize the protections you have in your environment, and think through 360 degrees. Where can attacks come from? Where can accidents cause problems? Where are threats real world coming from today? So
I kind of doubt that the peasants had nice grass like that, Henry. That's nicer than my grass.
Yeah, I think this is this castle has been curated and kept alive. It's probably a tourist there.
I think it has a vending. You can go there and get a hamburger or whatever, you know.
Yeah, there probably is a McDonald's just to the right of the screen.
Yeah.
More than likely, you know. So using the castle defense and that analogy, you know, back in the day, suit of armor was all that we needed. You know, I like to think of this is that little blue shield that was on everybody's computer 20 years ago. And over the time, we added antivirus, and we added backup, and we added, you know, firewalls, and we added a couple protections. So this is kind of maybe, you know, we've evolved protections, and it feels like it's a never-ending story. And unfortunately, there's some degree of truth to that from our perspective, Jason, because the hackers are constantly finding ways to adapt, and they're constantly finding ways to say, okay, this guy's got these protections, these defenses, so let me evolve. And we joke about it. Look, at your average heavily equipped and well-trained soldier, it probably wouldn't stand a whole lot of a chance against the Mandalorian. But what's coming next, and what's really terrifying, is artificial intelligence generating viruses, creating and running attacks. And this is a reality that we're seeing right now. Is that these groups are actively investing in AI research. Those big organizations that are the bad guys, they are actively investing in tools and technologies and the future to keep their
throughout the history of all warfare, Henry, the attacker has always had the advantage. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of it. If you study the history of warfare, at first you had wooden swords and wooden shields, and then they come up with metal swords to wooden shields, and then you have metal shields and metal swords, and then catapults. But or look at the Romans with their with the 20-foot long spears. How are we supposed to defend against that at the time? But historically speaking, and this is definitely true in the cyber realm, attackers always have the advantage, always.
Yeah.
And they know that, and they take advantage of it.
Right. In cyber defense, what we try to explain to people is that the defender has to be 100% perfect, and the attacker has to be lucky.
Yep. And fate favors the bold.
Right. Exactly. So that kind of wraps up the big stuff that we got through. I want to make sure we have questions to throw them out here. But and we'll get to those in just a second. But we've got the looming question of well nuts. What do I do? There's because it feels like we're painting a little bit of a picture of what you're doing right now is potentially not enough. And if that's the picture you're picking up from this, I think we've been effective here. So what I would like to throw out there is a very non-technical audit that we can offer you to just sit down and think through on paper. Maybe we load up a tool or two and think through and look at some consoles or whatnot, but let's look at your current stack of defenses. And I'm talking from policies and procedures that help your team know how to work, all the way to what endpoint protection product and firewalls, and how are you protecting your data that's in the cloud and Amazon and Microsoft. Let's look at the full stack. What TurnKey is offering is a free confidential review of your security stack to see where it stands up against 2023 guidelines. Maybe you have a product that's doing one defense in one part. Maybe your moat needs to be upgraded, to use the castle example. And we'll be able to tell you, here's what we've got, here's what you have, here's the potential areas for attack, and this tool right here needs to be brought up to current standards. These over here you maybe need to implement better. These over here you've got done set up just right. So it's an absolutely zero cost audit for you. If you go to turnkeysol.com/stack, STACK, then fill that out. We'll communicate back with you. We'll set up a time and sit down and walk through that. It doesn't take long, but it is massively informative. There is an additional thing that we've got to throw out there, courtesy of the folks at ConnectWise and SentinelOne and Jason's team. We've got the ability to offer you a 30-day demo, limited demo of SentinelOne. It is an amazing endpoint detection and response product. It's what I drive. It's what I've got on my computer right now. It's what we really. It's a phenomenally strong product. I cannot recommend it enough as an incredibly important cornerstone key building block of your defense. It is not everything, but it is really important. If you want to try that out, holler at me, email me at ask@tks.la, or just reach out any which way you can, and we can hook you up with that. We mentioned this before at the beginning of the conversation, turnkeysol.com/guide. What we're going to walk through there is everything that I could think of to boil into, how does the executive, the boss, the CEO protect themselves? What does a secure organization look like? And what are the pieces of your stack and how you build them? As well as some very strong third-party free resources for policies, procedures, templates for how do we do X, Y, and Z. It's all baked in there.
Henry, SentinelOne's like Snap-on. You don't buy that at Home Depot, right? And until 5 or 6 years ago, SentinelOne wasn't available to the SMB space at all.
Right.
You couldn't even get it. I think that the buy-in was like 5,000 seats or something like that, or 1,000 seats. So, if you're Boeing or General Electric, but the small to mid-sized business, there was no penetration. And it was through business relationships via, J. Ryerson Carver, and then Continuum, and then through ConnectWise, where they work to make these enterprise grade technologies available. And SentinelOne, this stuff, like I said, that's like Snap-on or like Mac Tools. This is the best stuff there is. And now it's available to a business space where previously it just wasn't, and this is a remarkable achievement in my view.
It is. It's a phenomenal achievement. And we started using it when it was about 1,000 seats to buy in.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, sure. We'll sell it. You just need to buy at least 1,000.
Right.
Well, that doesn't help me. I'm a dentist.
Right. I mean? Yeah. It was a tough buy-in proposition. So a couple other resources out there. We did, like we mentioned earlier, I wrote a book about everything that I could think of to try to help business owners and IT directors kind of navigate the conversations and what to do next. That's available here. All of our resources are free to access. Just reach out to us any which way you can. But these are the landing pages where you can just get those resources right away without delay, and we will be more than glad to get those to you. And we'll kind of wrap that up here. It looks like we may have 1 or 2 questions. We had this is a pretty good one from looks like John, who asked, look, we've been pretty safe thus far. And we've been using a bunch of different protections. Why do I need to do a SOC now?
For the same reason that you wouldn't keep driving a car around without ABS and without airbags and ABS, because the technology has just moved on. And from a practical standpoint, the threats have evolved a lot. The things that they're targeting have evolved a lot, and you just need better protection. And I wouldn't, operate a modern information system today on a 24/7, 365 basis any more than I would let my kid drive around a car without anti-lock brakes and airbags. It's just the technology's moved on. It's just not enough anymore. Would you take that risk? And I think the question is, in most cases, no. I want at least some modern protections, and then ideally some kind of collision avoidance and these kinds of things. And technology has just moved on. And just because you haven't had an incident yet doesn't, you're still at a increased risk.
Yep. All right. Well, I really appreciate you answering the questions. If we don't have any other questions at the moment, we'll kind of wrap up from here. If there are additional questions that you think of, or you'd like to talk more about this, please feel free to reach out to us. You can call us at 225-751-4444 at any time. If you'd like to get your security stack reviewed and see how it stacks up to today's 2023 standards, make sure you launch into the year with the right tools, the right preparations and precautions everywhere around your business, everywhere around your crown jewels. Check us out at turnkeysaw.com/stack. We'll get you a confidential conversation with one of our lead analysts to sit down and have that analysis. And with that, Jason, I'll just tell you, I really appreciate your insight. We really appreciate your time and lending your wisdom and experience to us. And we love having ConnectWise as a partner, and you guys do great work for us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Henry. It's always a pleasure to have these kind of talks. Cool. It's easy for me and I'm good at it.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for showing up and hanging out, and thank you for your question. And if you have anything else that we can be of service to you, please don't hesitate to reach out. We wish you absolutely all the best, and we look forward to being of service to you this year and in the future. And if there's any questions you have, give us, you know how to reach us. Thank you all. Have a great day. And again, Jason, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. Talk to you later.